Welcome everyone to the National Lighting Bureau's panel on Women in Lighting for the annual Lighting Forum. I'm Kelly Roberts, Studio Director at Wald Studio and President of Women in Lighting and Design, more popularly known as WILD. I'm thrilled to be here today and have a group of outstanding individuals with an impressive resume of work across the industry. We have here Helen Deemer, Principal at the Lighting Practice, Andrea Hartraft, Principal at Hartraft Lighting Design, Tanya Hernandez, Vice President of Government and Industry Relations at Acuity Brands, Paula Martinez Nobles, Principal at Fisher Moran Stone, Nancy Stathis, President of Nanometer Lighting. Thank you all for being here today. To begin, I'd like to dive straight into a topic that WILD continues to bring to the forefront of conversation. It's an issue that we see as one of the main causes of inequity for women in the industry, and this is being a working mother. Over the years, we've heard how women continue to leave the workforce during this stage of life. Family leave policies are minimal, flexible hours are not supported, and other assistance either in the office or at home does not exist. This can impact pay and promotions, networking opportunities, and success in the workforce. And the pandemic has only heightened these problems. But because of all the conversations and articles written about it recently, we're also seeing a shift. People are starting to listen and we're starting to take action. So what I'd like to ask first as a baseline is, if you're a working mother, did you see an impact on that choice in your career? And I think I'd like to start with Paula.
So yes, it definitely impacted my career. I actually started having babies very early in my career, which was actually very helpful and fortunate. But when I was probably in my second and a half, third year at FMS, when I had my first daughter, who's now almost 13, or who is 13. And one of the things that I could say was very different from her being born 13 years ago and my youngest, Layla, being born 5 years ago, is that I was much more comfortable in my skin to say and request and even insist upon a little bit more flexibility for me as a working mom, as a person who had a little bit more of a position in the office to really make some noise. In our office at that point, we didn't have a lot of working moms, or we didn't have any working moms. And so it was kind of a strange thing to even bring up. There wasn't any other woman to talk to. It's just so happened that 3 months after I became pregnant, another designer became pregnant in the first go around. So we did it together. But definitely by the time I had my youngest, it was there was more room for conversation, and it became a little bit more of a topic of, all right, this is something that we are going to have to address in the future. And also you start to, when you ask for things or when you insist that there be a little bit more flexibility, you start to realize you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for all the other women that are looking up to you, even for the guys, parents, dads that are in the space, that are in the office, that maybe didn't think they even should say anything. And at that point, there were other guys and other dads that were in our office that said, it would really be great to have paternal leave as well. And it just makes you realize, like, you're not alone. And there all of a sudden is a conversation that's had.
I think it's really interesting how you said you had this other woman in the office that also got pregnant around the same time, and that gave you the strength to feel like you could ask for something. I'm curious if anybody else had a similar experience or was on their own and kind of had to fight for what they were.
So when I had my daughter, it was very much whatever the staples of policies were in place by the federal government, the state, and that was it. And it was to the letter of the law, if you will, my maternity leave. Oddly enough, less than 24 hours after my daughter was born and I was in recovery, the office called. And, which was thrilling and scary and upsetting all at the same time, in all candor. I was the only woman in management that was of childbearing years. And in the role I had, I was the only woman. So it was Very difficult because it was very matter of fact. These are the rules, these are the regulations, and we will adhere to those. The financial impact was devastating. My daughter was the best surprise we've ever had in our life, but we were not financially prepared to take that hit on the salary. And my maternity leave was then cut short. And it was very difficult to return to work that quickly because I did not have the financial wherewithal at that point. When my son was born, the relevance of my role was they prompted the conversation. And that made me feel terrific because, again, I was still the only woman that was in that predicament, if you will. And it was, okay, how are we going to work with you during this leave? And to their credit, they subsidized my income. So it did not have a pain point that it did the first time.
But what I felt, not thinking about leave or anything like that, is that that I was skipped over for many roles and opportunities because people assumed that I did not want to travel to China, or I did not want to take a particular role because she's got small children at home. Back then, which was the late 90s, working from home was not like it is now. It was absolutely a perk, might not even, it was denied to most people. And so I totally felt the impact that, I wasn't able to necessarily take advantage of opportunities that others were able to take advantage of.
I had actually a sort of an interesting experience when I got pregnant and had my son, who's just a little tiny bit older than Nancy's daughter. Jacob is turning 29. I don't know how that happened. But I sort of spread him over three companies. I was pregnant with him at one company. I think it's fair to say that I was marginalized at that company, maybe at my own doing, maybe because I was pregnant. Nobody sat me down and said, hey, you're pregnant. We're not going to give you any opportunities, but whatever. I had to be on bed rest for a bit. And they would shuttle work to me. So every night somebody would bring work, I'd work on it in bed. And, that sort of got me through until, because I really could not afford at the time to take leave. Once Jacob was born, it didn't take me very long to decide that perhaps I needed to find a new place to work. So I did. And I was back at work within 3 weeks of giving birth. And there was really not a whole lot of options. And truthfully, it might have been sooner if I hadn't figured out how to extend my short-term disability. So it really was, it wasn't the easiest thing for sure, but the place that Jacob went from 0 to 2 years old, actually, they were very good to me with regard to him. They had no issue with me bringing him to work. So I had a scooting, sometimes crawling, sometimes walking little substance roaming around. And we did some defense work at that particular office. So there were times where I would have to be in a secure space. I'm not sure why he couldn't be in there with me, to be honest. It's not like he could read, but nevertheless, he would stay out and somebody would watch him. I mean, I came back one time from a meeting in a skiff and somebody had changed his diaper. So that was a situation that I never expected to be actually far better than it was. And then I went to work for Candy Kling, and Jacob was about 2, and we had him in daycare. And I just remember, even from the very beginning, and Candy knew that I had to leave by 4:30 to pick up Jacob so that we didn't get a fee on top of the exorbitant prices we were paying for daycare anyway. And she would call me if she didn't see me walk by her office at 4:30, I would get a call from Candy. You need to leave now, which, was unbelievable and super helpful to me, because, you know, you get into that side of your brain, you're gone. Time means nothing.
I think the lessons we're learning from all of your experiences and the lessons we're seeing with the pandemic and the women we're losing to that are helping, but we're also learning how to work differently now. So people are seeing opportunities with this. I want to invite Helen to speak. Before I actually would like to talk about some of the more specific things we can do to help women in the workforce, parents in the workforce in general, because it is just as important to have the fathers leaving the office as it is for the women. So, Helen.
Thanks, Kelly. I just wanted to say that listening to my colleagues here makes me doubly thankful for the situation that I had. I had my children even longer ago than everybody else. My daughter's going to turn 30 this week, actually. And we have a son who's 27. So I was working in New York with a medium-sized lighting design firm when I had Claire. And there were two women who actually had babies the same year as me, like within a few months of me. And I have to say that they laid a little bit of groundwork with our boss, who was open to some flexibility. I was out for 3.5 months, I believe, and I got not full pay, but I think about half pay during that time. And I was able to request to come back on a part-time schedule when I returned to work. And then I changed jobs and moved to Philadelphia before our second child was born. I was pregnant when I interviewed for the job at the lighting practice. And I spoke to Al Borden, about working a part-time schedule when I started here. So I started working 3 days a week. I eventually upped that to 4 days a week. But again, the policy at the lighting practice was that for maternity leave, you could take 8 weeks off at the time at half pay. I extended it to, again, 3.5 months. I think I was out. And I mean, I did some of my own negotiating there, but there was the willingness and the understanding that that was something I needed to do to be a healthy and productive person. And interestingly, about a year later, another woman in our office got pregnant, and she was thanking me for having laid some groundwork for the future. And I hadn't really thought about it at the time that I was doing what I was doing. I honestly did it out of my own self-interest, but subsequent to that, we opened that policy to fathers in our office, that if they, needed to take time off, if they wanted to work a part-time schedule, that we would work with them to work that out. And we have subsequently, in the last several years, formalized that, so that it's not just like a one-on-one basis. We'll work it out with each person. We have a policy of 12 weeks at half pay for maternity, and a 4-week half pay for fathers and adoptive parents. So
you're all higher levels in your companies, owning your companies. FMLA, that we've mentioned a couple times, is only applicable to companies that have over 50 people. So I'm curious, on both ends of the spectrum then, if the companies that do qualify for FMLA, and Helen, you've already spoken to this now, but if you offer additional coverage, and then for those who don't, what do you do? Because do you also just match what FMLA is offering? How do you support your employees when they come to this stage in life?
If Kelly, I hear your point of some of us some people have the courage to speak up, other people won't. And how do we take care of both kind of individuals, so you don't end up having a sort of let's talk about it and let's revise our policy now because somebody has asked, or only as needed basis. definitely the state laws that are moving us in that direction to provide more coverage are extremely helpful. But also I have found in my own situation, and I've been in my office for, my whole career, nearly 17 years. And what I have found is sometimes there is it's just not part of the experience. It's not part of the conversation. It hasn't been until you bring it up. And so just continuing to push those conversations. And now even as a partner, I have those conversations with my colleagues, right? My side to side colleagues that says, this is something that we're going to have to start pushing for. It's something that's going to creep up on us. We have lots of females in our office. We're predominantly female in our office. It's going to happen. And you start to, at least get people comfortable with the idea of, oh, okay, this is possible, or it's the right thing to do, because not everybody's going to feel that way, especially if the law doesn't require it. And I think that just having those dialogues, just having those conversations and starting early on, even when it doesn't affect you. I think, like Helen, you said, people then later say, oh, thank you for laying the groundwork. Well, if you even start laying the groundwork, even when you don't have kids or you're not in the middle of a pregnancy or maternity leave, it does help the situation for the future generations.
Andrea?
I agree, and I think I'm figuring out our policy. PTO is easy. Family leave, when you're a small company, isn't as easy. That means doesn't mean anything. That just means it's not as easy. It doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. It absolutely should. But I think the other piece to that is reaching out to employees and being flexible and willing to, one, ask them what they want. Making assumptions of what they need has always been irksome to me at the very least. There's a lot of questions that I don't think cross boundaries, but that can, let them voice what they need with regard to either time off or a desire to work at home, or what they need to balance that. And I think we can be proactive about that as well, and have those conversations if we feel that they're open to them and they're comfortable with them on top of having something in place so that they know that they have coverage of some sort.
And when you work for a much larger group, it is very difficult to make anything personal. I worked for a privately held company, and it was a family, and it was okay because it was personal. We were big but small enough to have dialogue and not necessarily have this rule, but make things happen because it was okay. When that situation changed and we became part of a very large machine, that's a very, very different perspective, because it's not one building, it's 25, it's tens of thousands of employees. And to make it personal is just against the way the machine works.
So I work at Acuity, and yes, we have lots of tens of thousands of employees. However, I think that, company culture is the thing that's important. Most people, you may or may not know, Family Medical Leave Act leave for Acuity is it's 12 weeks. And, of course, everybody has eligibility requirements, you can't start day one and then take your 12 weeks. But not a lot of time that's needed to be eligible. And so that's one of the things I'm excited about. We have maternity leave now, and it's the same for regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, to encourage, really to encourage the conversation. So a lot of this we don't like to talk about because we think we know what the rules are. And so you think you know what the rules are, it's kind of hard to start working outside of those. And so there's been a real effort the last couple of years to give folks this flexibility. I think the pandemic too has helped many companies, including Acuity, large companies, take a closer look at connectivity to employers and to employees, especially working mothers, because a lot of us have children at home. Because I've worked for a very small design firm. I've worked for a large manufacturer. I've worked for UL, which was thousands of employees as well. I'm used to having to just navigate. What are the rules? What have you said, right? And once you figure out what are the rules, then the nice thing is the culture matters. The personal part, like Nancy was speaking about, can count. And hopefully you're in a group where, like even I keep talking about working from home, but I mean, I still remember the sting of, oh my gosh, I've got to ask to work from home because I have a sick kid and I have a project to finish. And you don't ask for those things. Like you don't ask. That's how it felt. Like, oh, if you ask, it was almost like the sky would fall, right? But just wanted to kind of throw out that, even though larger companies, we have shareholders that we have to, that we have to, make sure are okay. We are still looking for ways to make life better for associates. Because guess what? All that does is add to our bottom line. When I'm happy, I do great work. When I'm not stressed out, I do better work. And so those are the things that, companies like mine are really trying to put out there.
I see it in the lighting industry with design firms, right? You have your company culture, but then we also, I think as an industry, have a culture. And I think the more, like Tanya was saying, the more you talk about it, the more we all say it out loud. And, like Andrea, hearing your thoughts on your office's policy, because it's a small, we have similar concerns, right? Our office is small. How do we extend family leave, maternity, paternity leave to cover everybody? And how far do we go? What's the expectation? So the conversation often goes back to, well, what are other companies doing? But if other companies are having the same conversation and no one is the first domino to fall, then no one is doing anything, no one is changing anything. And so what's really exciting about a conversation like this is that once people start to talking about it and normalize it, then all of a sudden maybe we see change happening.
So we're a small company. We have about 35 people. And I got to tell you that every time someone gets pregnant here, at least one other person does too. And we often have more than one person out at the same time. And while I'm very happy for the folks at a personal level, and I want to give them all the support I can, I can't lie that it is challenging to run the business, especially if the people happen to be senior people and they're going to be gone for 3 months or more. I don't have an answer to it. I mean, we accommodate it, but it has me on pins and needles lots of times and very anxious about, gee, are they actually going to come back? And is it going to be okay? And what might they need when they come back? Will they be able to work full time or not? And it's like I can see the parts of that Nancy was saying about bigger companies, but sometimes I wish I was a bigger company because maybe I would have more flexibility or more people to sort of fill the gaps when someone's gone. So
and I didn't want to confuse policy with culture, but at the end of the day, you have a business to run and you have a payroll dollar. And if you're going to have two people that are seniors and continue pay and have to backfill or hire a temporary or put the workload on the other members of the team, and how do they get rewarded for? So in there is why I think Paula was saying it's a big conversation. And when we speak about a personal experience and all of that, it's very difficult because we want to do right by our employees. We want to make sure they are valued, they feel valued. And I know we're talking about culture in a moment, but it's so important that they feel this way. And to Helen's point, you want to give them what they've earned. You've documented, you want to give that to them. But you are running a business, and those questions of will they be returning, it is not beyond the possibility that someone will be on a paid leave. And when it's over is when you get their notice, and you didn't have 12 weeks to fill the position. So it's a balancing act. And that's all of your policies. They're all balancing acts to ensure that the business doesn't suffer, and make sure that the culture is a good one. And that is what we deal with, all of us, every day.
The culture is a good one, is the thing that's going to help them come to you and have a conversation. If, and I understand, I completely get, 12, very different than 10,000. How do we deal with this? What do we do? And how do we make sure that, there isn't a big blip that happens while I'm gone, and, all of that, and I think some transparency in what it means, about the company is helpful in that regard, and understanding from the youngest to the most experienced of what it takes to run the company and what the impacts are of all things to the company really helps the conversation when the time comes to have, I don't want to call it a difficult conversation, but a reality conversation when realities, crop up.
And we've all started kind of heading in the direction of company culture. So I'd like to expand that off of just motherhood and parenting, and kind of talk about, as what you've expressed to me within the past. So Andrea, Nancy, Helen, what you've actually been talking about is that by having that company culture, hopefully you're retaining the women that are becoming pregnant, and they're coming back afterwards, because we have seen, there was a survey done in 2018 by other members of Wild that showed that we lose a lot of women during that age bracket. And that's right when it's so important for them to be continuing and making progress in their careers. So aside from that, which we've talked about, what other company culture has been developing past couple of years? What are you excited about seeing both in your companies and also in the lighting industry that is changing the way that the lighting industry is operating, making you feel more comfortable to be yourself, and also to help promote others moving up in the workforce?
So mentoring is important to me, and it's thank goodness it's actually a part of one of the initiatives. At my company, I also do it just informally as well. And mostly to younger women. And it's really to be a sounding board and a check-in, because I'm an electrical engineer, and I still have classmates who came out with me who, they worked for 2 years and said, I can't do this. And it wasn't that they couldn't do the work, it was just the environment. But basically the issues that get in the way, and I don't want to be explicit, but I just found that there are enough women who were leaving engineering. I mean, we're not even just talking about lighting, they're just leaving because it's, was very male dominated, and it came with a lot of issues that they weren't necessarily equipped to handle. So the mentorship part to me is important, because it's always good to have somebody to first of all say, hey, this happened to me. What should I do? What should have I done? Have you ever experienced this? I just remember when I was coming through, if I hadn't had the courage to say, oh, I got to do this, I didn't have an option. I don't have a fallback plan. I can't just go make jewelry somewhere and have somebody else pay my mortgage. It just wasn't going to happen. Because I had to be courageous through it, it's helped me to help others, and watching other, putting together like an entire mentoring program. So You have a slew of women. You know, I work for Cheryl English, and who gets to work for Cheryl English? You know, I'm excited. You know, so it's easy to give. It's easy to give back. It's easy to be that person for someone. And so I'm excited to see things like that. I'm excited to see like even the IES's emerging professionals, that wasn't there when I came through. And I feel like that they could probably even expand it and have it be more targeted. An emerging professionals on people of color, emerging professionals for women, or something to actually really focus on those issues that keep women from keep pursuing.
Can I ask just a quick follow-up to that? Does Acuity have a formal mentoring program?
We do. So we have employee resource groups. And so one is we have a women's group. We have one that's Magic. It's focused on minorities, mostly African Americans. We also have a Pride group. And we have a formal mentoring group that kind of it goes across multiple ERGs, but it's actually being revamped right now to be more, I guess, really more formal.
So my time at Hubble, there were 7 female executives. Of the 7, 6 were in what we would call customary roles for women. And we started, so that would be considered HR, finance, the law, those would be traditional female roles. So the 7 of us started what we called Watch, Women Advancing Their Careers at Hubble, where the 7 of us took that and said, okay, this is a big machine. Let's break it down and let's try to embrace and become something. And at the time, I was the only female executive at Hubble, and I was through an acquisition, not through growth. And that was something that became very important to leadership in the lighting division, that, wait a minute, organically, there has to be other people that can move through, and they don't always have to be on the finance team. So I think, to Tanya's point, yes, we had formal mentoring. And what's really nice about that is, there's suiting and what do you think would be a good match? But through different programs, through WILD, through IS meetings, through ILD meetings, you mentor organically. It just kind of happens, and you don't even realize that you're mentoring. You're having a conversation. You've built trust with someone who sees you as, maybe I can ask because you've earned their respect, and more importantly, their ability to keep things confidential, to keep it between the two of you.
So one of the things I've noticed over the last 2 years, you're in an office environment, which my firm hasn't had. We've been remote from the get-go, but it's a much different situation with regarding collaboration, or it can be, than this remote sort of whatever we've been living for the last 2 years. And I think it becomes kind of almost like a baptism by fire. You're going to have to find your way, because you're on your own, even if you aren't. And so that's where I think company culture starts to come into play, and having that mentoring. If your mentors are invested in the health of the company, then it's in the best interest of them and their projects and the health of the company to help the next group to be successful. I've worked in companies where it's been extremely competitive. Nobody does good work in that situation, I don't think. Maybe in like the big corporate culture, but in a creative situation, to feel like you're competing with each other for, morsels of recognition, I think is, for me, it's horrific. And I think that when the desire is for the company to do well and be perceived as a strong, successful, creative company, and to be proud to be part of building that, I think that's when there's a desire to reach out and help. And there's also a desire to grow as fast and as well as you possibly can.
No, so it's having 3 daughters, and especially 3 biracial daughters, definitely puts a little bit of a fire under you to realize that you've got to impact their future. You've got to help create a better future for them. And so it's been really easy for me to be motivated to see, all right, what else is out there? What else can I get involved in? Especially in just engineering fields and STEM fields where there are so few women, and especially biracial or minority women. I'm Colombian, I'm Hispanic, and even when I graduated from Penn State at the architectural engineering program, even in that department, there were 100 graduates, and out of the 100 back in 2005, there were maybe 4 or 5 of us that were minorities. And it's not, it hasn't changed much since then. And so one of those things that in the field, thanks to Wild, thanks to even the last 2 years of the IES, ILD, having inclusivity groups, committees, equity and diversity committees, all of that definitely helps. Being able to find your voice too, and just kind of encouraging the designers in our own office. We've got a couple of designers that are really adamant about change. They're really adamant about helping other designers coming up out of college and coming into offices and being able to have a voice, being able to have a say. How can they help? How can they get involved? And you start to see that the way you motivate them is to do it yourself, right? You bring somebody along with you. So one of the things that we did actually not that long ago is our office participated in NOMA, which is a national organization for minority architects, which is a great organization. And, we were one of the first lighting firms to be involved in that. And we were able to just have a talk about lighting in one of the conferences that they gave in Brooklyn. And what came of that was the realization that there are universities out there that have even less access to lighting courses than even some of the other architectural programs out there, right? So from that, we made a contact with Howard University, and we were able to start having a dialogue with one of their professors that every year we volunteer. We sit for an hour and a half and we teach their students. And this has been happening for now, I believe, a little bit over 2.5 years. And how that helps the industry is that maybe then in the future, there's an ability to say, all right, well, you know what lighting is because our company taught you, right? So now if I see that you have an interest and I've seen you year to year and you come interview, or you even go interview for another one of my colleagues, right, in the industry, then all of a sudden we've provided access. We've given you some access to the industry, to the field, and it's sort of very grassroots. And it's very easy to realize how little you have to put out there to make a little bit of an impact. And if that were just, happen across the industry, all of a sudden we'd get that much further. So it's been good in our office to see people get motivated by that. And I think in the industry in general.
The program that some of our staff has been involved in, and some of you may know of it, is called ACE Mentoring. And we have at least 2 people on our staff that participate in that. And it's to try to reach out to kids at the high school level and teach them about careers in architecture, engineering, and construction. And so they usually do, I think it's like the equivalent of maybe 10 weeks or so. And they, prior to the pandemic, would meet at people's offices, and they would divide up in teams, and the kids would do various projects, and they would work with, people from an architecture office and engineering office. Lighting's not very often represented, but in our case it is, a contractor, and they start to get a feel for what the process is that we all go through in our work. And they tour job sites, and they do a lot of different things. And we have been very supportive of that because we think that the access that you mentioned, Paula, giving people like the inspiration that there are these pathways that they may not have imagined for their future. We think that that's really important. And I would love to find more opportunities like that, because I think that reaching young people, even before they go to college, is a good place to start, and certainly people at the college level. So.
You know, sorry, but nobody, you know, wakes up as a 15-year-old and goes, I'm going to be a lighting designer. It just doesn't happen because they don't know it's a something. But if all of a sudden, you know, they see the coolness of what light can do at 10 and 11, you know, maybe it'll stick with them and something happens with that.
That reminds me of one other organization that we've gotten involved with on a limited basis, and it's called Girls Inc. And I was just quickly Googling it to remind myself of what their slogan is. It says, inspiring all girls to be smart, strong, and bold. And a few years ago, we had a group of middle school girls come to our office, and they spent the morning with us, and we had them do mock-ups and play with things in our mock-up room. And we taught them a little bit about the design process, you know, at a very elemental level, but it was great. It was a lot of fun. And some of our younger women staff said that they'd like to repeat that and do it again and get more involved with that organization. So I think that's another one that I almost forgot about. So
the programs aren't necessarily formalized, but there are a number of fraternities and sororities, especially in the African American community, because we don't just do fraternity and sororities in college. It's a lifetime commitment for most of us. And we have pipeline programs that where we work in middle school or high school with young men, young women. And typically the curriculum can be built around really what is your expertise, right? So if I'm involved and we're going to talk about engineering, we're going to talk about lighting, you'll get exposed to all kinds of things. And going back to the theme about bringing your kid to work or dragging your kid. So my daughter, you know, was able to benefit from a lot of that, you know, watching her mom tell everybody about how cool it is to be in lighting. And even though she's not in lighting, she's a mechanical engineer, but STEM works. And so STEM exposure, it does. I completely believe in, you know, exposure is the real issue. That if people don't know it's possible, then, you know, how do you get there? The other part is that, you know, a lot of us, and I'm not sure about this group, but, you know, what I found in industry is that a lot of us come to lighting by happenstance. Some of y'all are very purposeful, but not this child. I had no idea what lighting was until, you know, after I graduated from college, and I went to work for a design firm because I didn't have a job and was making a little bit of money. Oh my gosh, it was a two-man firm and I was one of the men.
I'm so excited to hear about all these programs. I think, you know, some of them might be a little grassroots. Some of them are definitely available. I know Girls Inc., for instance, does have groups all across the country that people can join up and partner with. And even though we may not be seeing the change immediately, we know that it's making a difference. They're going to grow up, they're going to spread the word, and they're going to they're going to join the industry, they're becoming mechanical engineers, whatever. But we are making a difference, and I think that's really exciting. So to close this out, I had asked each of you to select a word that you would like to help inspire or guide the next generation of people coming up into the industry.
So this was fun and hard and exciting at the same time, because I picked the word that I struggled with most of my career, and that was confidence. And it is so important to be confident, to know what you know and not apologize for it. Your delivery, of course, is always important, but be confident in what you know. And people respond better when you admit what you don't know. But if you can't speak with confidence as to what you know, and then something comes up that you don't know, you're much like a jellyfish. So having spent a decade or so as a jellyfish, my word for the next generation is confidence, and beam it and own it. That once you own that, the possibilities are endless.
My word is teamwork. And I thought about this a lot, and I realized that this is what, for me, has led to a lot of success in my life, both my family life, my work life, that I think too often we think we have to do everything ourselves and we have to be perfect, and we have to carry all the weight on our own shoulders. And while I absolutely believe in working hard, if you have a partner or a team of people who can help fill your gaps and you help fill theirs, you can get a lot further. And so I think it's important, and I hope that's an inspiring word for some people.
One of similar to Nancy, one of the things I struggled with the most at the beginning of my career is feeling like I could be my true self in this office environment where, I grew up in Philadelphia, first generation American, and it was a hard adjustment to be in an office environment and put on this office speak. So authenticity for me has become something that, at least more recently, I've come to realize that when you embrace your true self, you embrace, all of that background that made you who you are, and you're authentic with people, you're appreciated, and you also help others come up and appreciate themselves and get that confidence or feel that they belong. And so for just the next generation, for anybody out there who's trying to find themselves, just being authentic, being vulnerable sometimes is totally okay, right? Because it does help you move forward in life.
My word, which it took me many years to understand how important it is breathe. We try to fit 70 hours into a 24-hour day, and we find ourselves spinning around a lot of times. And when I remember to breathe, at least, it makes me slow down. It gives me some distance between the things that I'm about to jump in and make maybe bad decisions about. It lets me relax a little bit. It gives me perspective. And all of those things let me be better at the things that I need to be better at, and let me make decisions about what I really maybe don't need to be doing. So, I think in time, with all the other things like confidence and authenticity and the value of teamwork, we find ourselves in a place where we're allowed to start to breathe, but it's probably a habit that we should start from the minute we walk out of high school.
So I'm going to breathe. Thank you for that. I was recently asked, where does your confidence come from? And I struggled with the answer, but listening to the rest of you today kind of helped me formalize courage. That's my word. It's a little different than confidence, because courage is doing stuff when you're scared, when you have no idea what the outcome's going to be. It's about moving forward because you can't move backwards. And so I think courage is something that we as women, we continue to, we do it every day, all day, and we don't even pay attention to it. But I think that it's something that if you do it mindfully, that you can achieve pretty much anything.
And I think that's a great thought to leave us with today. We can achieve anything. I'd like to thank you, Helen, Tanya, Andrea, Nancy, and Paula, for your time today, for sharing your stories, sharing your expertise, providing the guidance you just gave. I'd also like to thank everyone listening and joining us for the Women in Lighting panel for the annual Lighting Forum of the National Lighting Bureau. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all very much. My name is Randy Reed, and I am the Executive Director of the National Lighting Bureau. And we were really pleased with today's session. We had 166 people to sign up. Please chat your questions on the Q&A panel. So just go to Q&A, send us your question, and then I will unmute you and then you can ask your question of the panel. Okay? Now I would like to introduce our moderator, Kelly Roberts, and Kelly will manage the Q&A. Kelly?
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much for all of the chat that has been going on. It's been really amazing to be reading all of the stories. I just want to thank again Andrea and Paula and Tanya and Nancy and Helen for being part of it with me. And we're here, happy to be here for a little bit of Q&A with you guys. If you have some additional questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I saw a couple come in on the chat. I was trying to keep track. There was a lot going on. So I think the first one, as we kind of get going, that was actually from an anonymous attendee. So, and Tanya, you were interested in answering this. Is there a parenthood penalty in terms of advancement, both for people who have children and those who don't? Are mothers who take time off or reduce hours considered less for promotions? On the other hand, are people who don't have children penalized because they reach the same levels of advancement at the same time, but haven't taken any time off? So you want to try that?
Sure. So I guess my answer would be yes and no, right? That's a very interesting question. You know, as a parent, as a working mother, of course, sometimes there comes penalties with the fact that somebody may believe that you're not as reliable as someone else who does not have certain obligations. But there also may be more put on people who don't have children because it is assumed that they, you know, have more availability. So there are all kinds of dynamics at play. I think we talked a lot about culture in the program. And I think this is where that comes into play a lot in terms of, you know, how people feel about folks. There are many working mothers who have achieved a lot. I mean, just been very successful, where people who don't have children have not been as successful. So I think a lot of it is ability, personality, culture. It's one of those it depends kind of questions, or at least that's how I interpret it.
And I think you all as panelists are examples of women who have been very successful with having children, and hopefully you all feel like good about that, like you're proud of yourselves, because we're all thankful for you to be here. Would anyone else like to add on to what Tanya was saying? Andrea?
You know, it's hard. Working is hard. Learning and becoming really good at what you do is hard. Raising kids is beyond hard. That's like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, is raising with my husband, my son. And I can't even imagine trying to do it without my husband. I mean, it's hard. Put all of that together, it's really, really, really hard. And something does give, you know? I mean, it's expecting to be superwoman is not realistic. And yet I think we are all expected to do that, because that's this romantic notion everybody has that, you know, we can do it all, and we can do it all. Are we going to do it all well? I don't know. I'm exhausted all the time. And my son's 29. He's my daughter-in-law's problem now. So, you know, I think there's compromise that has to happen all around, I think is what I'm saying. You know, when you decide that you want to have a child, you know that something is going to give. Like, you know, you're not going to have all the hours you used to have to work. Some of those hours have got to be apportioned to a child. When you hire someone of childbearing age, or that has children, or you know, to answer some of the other questions about men and their access to leave, a man who has you know, an opportunity to have a child in his life as well, you know that there's going to be compromise on your end as an employer. I mean, it's just hard. I think it's just really hard stuff to do well. And I think you know, reading, trying to keep up with all the comments, my God, that's been amazing. Everybody, it's definitely a very emotional topic, because it's so so near and dear to all of us. But now I got so emotional, I forgot what I was going to say. Darn it. But it's, we all take it very, very seriously. And we're all like in this boat trying to figure out what the best path is for our different situations. I mean, I have 12 people in my firm. My situation's always going to be different than Tanya's is, except for the humanity part of it. That part doesn't change no matter how many people you have in your office. So like as an industry, I think we do need to figure out how to guide this ship. And I love that there are partners like Wild and other industry partners that can maybe help be advocates for us so that we're not just one voice.
And I'll actually take a moment there to plug our parent resource group that we're trying to start, because our intention with that group is to do a couple things, and this touches on some of the other questions that have come up as well. Number one, to be a community for women that can come together and just talk and have these kinds of conversations privately and within their own spheres. But number two, to bring education out to the industry. What, maybe from those conversations, what are people looking for? This is what Andrea spoke about during the panel. So you need to ask, what does somebody want? You're not necessarily giving them what they want if you're just kind of following the directives from the government. And then number three is helping to starting to try and help change policy, which by providing a checklist of resources that employers can potentially have. Again, what people might be asking for, but also some of the things that we weren't getting into is, are there any grants that might be available to employers if they are a small company that could help them cover this type of things? So I will say, so Wild is working on that in the background. That's something that we're pretty excited about and we feel is extremely important to be bringing that to the industry. So if you want to be part of PRG Positive, Parent Resource Group, just sign up for the newsletter, right? And when we start having events, you'll start hearing about them. And I'll put that in the chat in a minute. Our website where you can go sign up for the newsletter. While I do that, I was wondering if Erin Gussert wanted to come to actually ask her question about the separate pay for fathers and adopted parents.
I just had a baby in September, so it's all like fresh in my head, and I love that there's this conversation happening right now. It's amazing. Yeah, I think it's interesting because my husband did have to go back to work both with this baby and my first child 5 years ago, just a month after being home with me. And it's always struck me as odd because, I'm with daycare, you have to have 2 months old before they can even go to daycare. And I don't have family close by. I didn't have that luxury with either of my children. And so it's just me and him, and we're here taking care of our kid. And so I'm stuck an extra month without the paid leave. And he has to go back to work because he doesn't have that opportunity to stay home with the kids. So I'm just wondering, why is there that it almost feels like a discrimination that I have to be home? Like I am required to stay home from work. And I, would love to have that opportunity to go back to work or have that equality there. And I just wonder why that is the way it is, especially, as employers yourselves. Like, what do you feel about that?
So Erin, thank you so much for actually bringing that up, because I realize that it may completely go over an employer's head that is the reason why you should have paternal leave, is to support the spouse or to support, the industry in general, right? Because at some point it's, you think you're maybe doing the right thing. You think that you're supporting the person who's, is gonna have more of the situation because they're pumping, because they're breastfeeding. And then you don't realize that you're actually making a decision for them. In our office, it's family leave, right? It's part of New York state law. It's not necessarily fully paid leave, but it's, your job security, right? But I think, again, the more you talk about it, the more people talk about it, the more it's part of Wild's, guide to parenting and how to support your staff that are parents, the more people understand that's why you do it. That's why you should think about it. That's why you should consider it.
There is a lot of different laws and protective for both parents, as Paula was saying. New York State, New York City has a paid family leave that are specific to parents, and whether they're adoptive or the mother, the father. So there's a lot of different paid family leave, and on the federal level, it's you have it as well. It's more about job protection, and it's very difficult to make up the difference in the funds. So while you are offered job protection for a 12-week period of time, not everyone is in a position to be able to fund their families for that 12-week period of time. So while the governments have tried to balance and provide different ways and mechanisms for people not to lose their job as a result of a sick parent or a new child, that we haven't come far enough along as far as the funds during these periods of time.
I appreciate Erin bringing up this question. It's a good question and food for thought. And I thought that Paula's response was actually really good. I mean, we have a policy at my company that is unequal between what we provide for mothers and what we provide for fathers. You give me some things to think about here. And I think the rationale, as Paula stated, of thinking that the mother has certain physical things to recover from after having the child, and also the breastfeeding piece of it, was certainly a consideration that went into our policy. But you raise a point that I frankly hadn't considered about making, in some ways, making some decisions for the family by having a policy like that. I think the challenge, on the other hand, is just the funding of the paternity, maternity, family leave is, in our case, it's on our company to do that. It's a self-funded policy. We don't have support from our local government. It's different in New York, but in Pennsylvania, that's our employees don't pay into a leave plan through the government. So there are financial implications to consider too.
Seems like it might be simplest to just handle family leave like we handle PTO. I mean, in our firm, PTO is PTO, whether you're sick, whether you're running away from home, no matter what you're doing,
Yeah.
It's one pot of PTO. And, I really do appreciate the idea that we are making a decision for people about how they're going to handle, raising their child and working. And if there is, if they know there is X amount of money, period, use it how you need to use it.
Right.
It does seem to really simplify things. That just makes all the sense in the world to me. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, I would add to that too. I mean, in our company, we have a PTO policy in addition to this, and so you are able to use your PTO, and it's a fairly generous PTO policy to supplement what we provide in terms of the maternity and paternity leave. So, that's usable to make up the other half of your income when you're on leave, and it's also usable for other time off. But it's an interesting idea, Andrea, to make the whole thing some form of PTO.
Yeah, it'd also make it more flexible because, the friends that I have that have kids whose fathers do get time off, often it's not specifically related to when the child was born necessarily. It's like within the first year or 2 years or something. And that is also crucial to making sure those times when the child is sick, it's not just falling on the mom to take the time off, which we were seeing a lot of in the comments, right, during the panel. Does anybody else want to say anything about that topic? Okay. Then I would like to invite Jessica Nuez to come and ask one of her questions. She had multiple during the panel, but she said she'd figure one out.
Hi guys, thanks for this. This has been amazing. I guess my questions all kind of refer to one, and it's really being discriminated against as a working mom. And I feel like the advice that I was given was stop being so ambitious and try not to, you know, get ahead or all of those, which I don't necessarily agree with. But I work at a predominantly MEP firm right now, and so lighting design is not the primary focus, and the majority of the people that work here are males, and sometimes their mouths don't always think about what's coming out, right? So I mean, it even stems just from conversations that are specifically directed at working mothers, and it's obvious, right? So how do you not take that personally? How do you navigate that in order to I guess in order to stop that, right? Because you can perform as well as you do, you work late after hours, and you still show that you care and that it's important to you. But it seems like in the back of their minds, that's all they think about.
I think we have moved into, for sure, more and more double income homes, requirements to enjoy life. And that was certainly not always the case in my parents. My mother didn't work for many people. And it was viewed very often that, well, the moment she has a baby, she won't be returning, because there was this unfortunate view. I remember when my daughter started kindergarten, I was the only working mom. And that was very upsetting on a multitude of levels. But at the end of the day, we ladies have come a long way. And it's not always about money. We are motivated, we're educated, we're driven, we have something to give to society and to ourselves. So there's a lot of reasons that more and more women are in the workforce. And it's not just for financial reasons. So I'm really hoping that businesses become more astute to two things, that your workforce is growing and becoming very, very reliable. And the choices people make are a variety of reasons why they're doing what they're doing. And it's not always financially motivated. And in leadership, we always have to remember that our children are small, our employees' children are small, given the length of a career, a much shorter time. And the more we can work with and continue to make an effort for paternity, maternity, the better it is long-term for your business, their career, and your own sanity.
It's not your job to change their minds, the people that are saying those things. It's not your job to correct them in a way that you think that you failed if they don't change. Personally, if you've got the ability, the courage to say, hey, that's not funny, or hey, I don't appreciate that, you should go for it, because it'll help somebody else. If you don't, I find it's also just as important to be able to shrug that off and say, they're just ignorant, they don't know better, I'm going to keep moving, because otherwise I'm going to hold on to all that baggage, and it's just a pain in the ass to do that. So I'd rather, dismiss it, forget it, move on. I've got places to go, I got places to be, so I'm gonna just keep moving.
I couldn't agree more, Paula. I mean, there's always going to be butt heads. They're going to come in every shape, size, and gender, unfortunately, and that is what it is. I think, I've been doing this for 36 years, whatever it is. And I have walked into many, many meetings where I was the only female in the room, where I always used to say, everybody had to pee on everybody else before they sorted each other out and then figured out, who was going to talk and who wasn't going to talk. But, I had to figure out very quickly which hills I was going to stand on and which ones really didn't matter. And the hills that mattered to me, I would wait, they could bluster away and, talk louder than everybody in the room. And when they were all done, I would very quietly make sure that they didn't get up and leave until I had said what I needed to say and got what I needed to get. And I think any of this, if you can know very firmly in your mind where your hills are and what is important when you go into any situation, I think that's extremely helpful. And that helps with confidence and some of the other words and courage and all of that.
I was going to just reiterate the courage part, but it actually, so it sounds like you are immersed in this culture, meaning that you see this every day, which is different than, just kind of walking into situations. And I have lived that I lived it for a long time. When I first, got out of school, when I first started having babies, I just worked around men. The women were administrative assistants, honestly, but all the engineers were men, and they would say whatever they wanted to say. And so in terms of like picking your battles, you do have to pick them, but they should know where you stand, because in that way they're less likely to continue with that. The other part is that you'll have to find your courage, because it does weigh. I mean, I know it weighed on me. It's like, oh, because I need to be gone because I have to leave at a certain time for daycare, right? And other people can stick around. Does that make me less valuable? And so you just have to decide for yourself where your value, where your worth is, and not let it be determined by what folks are saying around you. You know what work you do after hours. You know what your capabilities are. So I just wanted to add that, because I know what it feels like to be immersed, and it actually, just imagine just a working mother, but I'm also an African American, and so people look at me and have thoughts about my competency just walking in the door, and it's very similar. There's nothing that I can do really about it other than to be courageous, to know my worth, to know I know what I know, and keep moving.
I think I'm going to step on, go from there and actually combine two anonymous questions that we got that kind of tie in. And they're both just looking for advice on what to do in the number one, the starting point of planning a family and starting to have those conversations with your employer. And she says, P.S. I work mostly with men. So it's probably an uncomfortable conversation to have. And then another that also is asking for how to handle choosing jobs or not, because she's currently pumping. And if she's needing to go to job sites and has no place to do that, what do you do? I'm just putting both of those together so you can kind of respond to whichever one you feel you'd like to, but would anyone like to give some advice to these two women? The car. Thank you, Jody. The car. It's probably true.
I can't see another hand. I'll jump in here. Just resources as far as, figuring out what the state laws are, figuring out what the FMLA requirements are, just at a minimum. You should, in theory, have somebody in your office that you could also speak to as far as HR policies, right? The minimum. I think after having this conversation, we typically don't have FMLA spelled out because it's a state law, right? But it does seem that, if you're in office and you're paying attention to what your employees needs, for it to be readily accessible to them would be a nice thing to have, a nice thing to do for your employees. Then I think the second question about if you want to go to a job site, or, is there a way to even go to a job site if you need to pump? I've had conversations with architects where, I'm coming to the job site, but I'll be in your office a little bit before and a little bit after because I need to pump. And just, again, finding the courage to say that, I know is, it was really hard the first time around. It was really easy the third time around. And I think the more it's normal, it's not as hard. But even having like a female architect, if that makes things easier, to have that same conversation with them. Hey, I'm about to go to the job site. I'm going to be there all day. Do you know if there's a place to pump? Maybe kind of decentralize it from yourself. Have the architect help you out and find out from the contractors, where could I do this? There might be a site trailer that you could go sit in a corner and do that. Or you could, like somebody said, in the car, there's devices, you could do that. You could wear it under your clothes. There's new things out there that we didn't have 10 years ago.
Have the conversation if you can. I do understand that sometimes broaching these topics seems delicate or sensitive, but as Paula was saying, the first time's the hardest. And the more transparent you can be about things, the more you can find your employer or your colleagues will help you, I think, to navigate these kinds of issues. And we need to be talking about what each other needs so that we can come to a mutual agreement of something that works. I think in many cases, it's better to assume good intentions rather than to assume, my employer just doesn't care about this or won't accommodate or whatever. Sometimes you'll be happily surprised if you just start the conversation.
Actually, this is making me think something I hadn't really thought about. I mean, our office, we have people in, I think, 7 different states, and each state may or may not have family leave laws. So having something in place that overrides and hopefully exceeds, those laws and sets a standard for the entirety of the office, we're not going to be an anomaly anymore, my firm. I mean, everybody's going to these remote kind of models now just because it makes sense. And I think we kind of have to rise above even the minimums that have been set by the government, because there's going to be disparity across offices if we don't, which hadn't occurred to me until just this very minute, but it makes a lot of sense to me now. So that's all. It's just, thank you for helping me to learn and grow.
Yeah, and as Mindy just put in the chat, the more of us that ask and have these uncomfortable conversations, the easier the dialogue becomes to have, and it becomes more mainstream, and it dissolves the stigma. So I'd actually like to invite Brittany Lynch to come and ask a question as well. She put a good one in the chat. And I'll also just say that she is our leader for our parent resource group. So she's thought a lot about this.
Thanks, Kelly. So I was hearing a lot of pushback of, geez, I have this many employees going on maternity leave. I'm nervous. And so I want to ask the question about challenging the status quo of 40 hours per week, on average 2 to 3 weeks off per year. I just put in my comment that in the 1950s, we had only about 40% of parents working outside of the home, whereas today that's 75% of parents working outside of the home. And so I think it's time to challenge that status quo, which started in the 1950s, of that work schedule. And so I would just like to hear from your perspective as really leaders in the lighting design business, how would that look? Is that a good idea? Just want to hear some feedback here.
Andrea, do you want to take that on?
Mine is, Nancy, you can go. Mine is going to be very different than Nancy's. I know that already because I'm small. But at the end of the day, the only thing I care about in my firm is that the work gets done when it says it's going to get done, and it gets done properly. And that means that people, in our firm, and I'm going to bet Helen has a similar situation, they get their work done, whether they're doing their work at 11 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning, or they're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning like I do and go, oh, that's how you do that. And they go back to sleep, whatever the case, we are accommodating our needs and using our days, but not being tied to 9 to 5 and the 40-hour work week. Now maybe that might mean it's a longer work week, maybe it's a shorter work week, but there's I think, especially with remote people working from home more and more and more, there's a little bit more capability to be a bit more flexible. And I just can't imagine not allowing for that flexibility. With that said, and I've seen in some of the comments, it's really hard to get your work done when you've got 1, 2, 3 kids at home. I mean, it was hard when I had a dog in the house. I mean, she'd come and sit next to me. All I wanted to do was play with her. I wasn't getting any work done. I totally get it. But, I think we're able to afford people some flexibility now if they work at home, but they work. I mean, that's the compromise. That's the balance, is you get all of that, but you have to earn all of that by being responsible and getting your work done and doing it on time and doing what you say you're going to do and doing it at the level of quality that you've always performed to. Those are just kind of givens. So I think things are, I don't think I don't know that I agree that we're all in that mindset of 40-hour, 9 to 5, all of that. I think there's a lot more flexibility. If COVID's taught us nothing, because it certainly hasn't taught us enough, but if it's taught us nothing, it's that, we can work flexibly and still be successful.
Before you jump in, can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because I think a lot of the 40-hour work week is tied to the billable hour structure that so many companies use. So if you're not billing the hours, then your company's not getting paid for them. So no matter how awesome you are, and if you do something really fast, it's actually a detriment in some ways. So this is totally off topic potentially, but like, how do you, if an employee is getting an amazing amount of work done in, let's just say 20 hours, like how do you balance that against what you're billing for a job? And then just because, Nancy, I want you to speak after that, do designers have a little bit of a better capability of having that flexibility than other jobs in the industry?
I'm not going to say a whole lot about that. I am going to say that it depends on how you structure your contract with your clients. Beyond that, I'm not sure we're even allowed to talk too much beyond that. So I'm not going to, but
Fair.
It's something to think about as you structure how you bill and the way that you bill.
You're absolutely right. It depends on the business, the needs of the business, and of course the roles within the business. When you're in manufacturing, it's very difficult to have a very flexible with the entire workforce. It's just not possible. Are there roles within the organization that we are able to be more flexible than others because of engineers can work from home certain portions during the week, so we can be flexible? Brittany, I'm not sure if you were suggesting 2 people for 1 full-time job, or was it 1 full-time job that's just less hours? So I'm not sure if I heard that portion correctly. I don't know if we're able to change the 37.5 or 40-hour work week.
I'm really about changing maybe it is a 2 people for 1 40-hour. I'm in work at Clinton and we have a lot of part-time employees, and it helps us work in teams, so we're not so autonomous. And I think that the performance review structure, if we changed it to a team performance review, for example, instead of an individual performance review, that could also inspire change. There's other ways we can do this. We don't have to sit in this model anymore. And I was just wondering what we were thinking about that, as you are the leaders in our industry, the business owners. So, I'm kind of putting everything on its head at this point, just trying to brainstorm.
I think it goes back again to a little bit of the office culture, right? If you see that there's a person who's of value that can contribute to the team and they're a part-time employee, and just as you were proposing, can offload some hours, right? Because they're either working on a outside contractor basis or just a part-time employee, and it means that you're working in teams as opposed to only one person having all the information, and when they're out, then you're really screwed. I think it's how you pivot, it's how you adjust to the circumstances in the office, and culture-wise, how you're projecting that in the studio. And you look around the room, you look around your office and see how are people working, how effective are they being, what works, what doesn't.
Does anyone else want to jump in? And
yeah, I just wanted to chime in a bit. So this actually reminded me of, remember the movie 9 to 5? This was actually one of the solutions that was posed, was this job sharing thing. And I mean, I watched that as a child, amused because it was a funny movie, but listening to the concept, it was like, yeah, why would you not have that, right? Where you had one person coming into work at a certain time and they got off and then kind of like slapped hands with the next lady who was, going to fill that the rest of the day, that the rest of the time. And I realized that there are, obstacles to that as well. You're talking about multiple people, additional benefits, additional things that come with having, job sharing. But I did want to just say that, I think Andrea was really good about saying the pandemic has changed a lot. So things are not as rigid as they used to be. Flexibility, I mean, even in manufacturing, it's there. So I can work from 10 at night until whenever if I wanted. As it's based on the outcome. It's not based on are you filling a seat at a certain time. So I think flexibility is definitely the key. But of course, it also comes down to the needs of the business and making sure that all of it fits within the needs of the business.
And I think that's probably a good place to end, since it's 1:30 Eastern time. So I just want to again thank the National Lighting Bureau for hosting this panel. Randy, thank you very much. Thank you everyone who came today and was able to stay through our entire Q&A. I'm just going to promote, if I can for a second, that WILD has an International Women's Day event coming up on Tuesday. If you want to attend, I just put the link in the chat. Everyone is welcome. And as a final goodbye, I just wanted to say a huge final thank you to my panelists, because you guys have been really amazing and inspirational. So Andrea, Nancy, Helen, Tanya, and Paula, thank you so much.
I want to thank you as a moderator. You did a tremendous job putting all this together. So thank you very much. A lot to talk about, to digest here. This will be available on YouTube late this week or early next week, and we'll be publishing that link. And please mark your calendar for next Wednesday, The Direction of Circadian Lighting and Circadian Science with Dr. Mark Ray, Mariana Figuerio, and Adam Leline. And that'll be 9 March at 12 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all. Have a great day.